Hello everyone, I am Kumar Aditya and I welcome you to this webinar titled Building a Compliance First Workforce Security for Digital India, DPDPA, RBI and SEBI. Now this session is presented under the banner of ET Legal World and ET CISO in association with Zoho Sign and Zoho Vault, a part of Legal Security Council, a curated webinar series focused on the future of secure and compliant digital operations in India. Now, as India moves rapidly towards the digital economy, workforce security and data protection have become critical priorities, with the DPDPA setting new standards for privacy alongside evolving cybersecurity and governance expectations from RBI and SEBI. Organizations must adopt a compliance first approach to workforce management. Today, ET Legal World, in collaboration with Zoho World, is hosting this webinar bringing together legal, compliance, and tech leaders to discuss how organizations can build secure, compliant workforce framework aligned with India's rules and regulatory landscape. Now, this session will offer practical insights on managing data, access, and risk while enabling a resilient and future-ready digital India. Today, for this discussion, we'll be joined by Mr. Chandramouli Dorai, Chief Evangelist, Cyber Solutions and Digital Signature, Zoho Corporation; Mohammad Naseemul Haq Zaki, Managing Partner, Mizan, Realm of Law, Advocate and a Corporate Advisor and a Certified Independent Director; Mr. Arinjay Vyas, Senior Specialist, AI Governance and Data Privacy from LTI Mindtree; Ms. C.S. Vandana Bhatia, Vice President, Head of Legal Compliance and Secretariat from DBS Tech India; Shephali Mehra, from Senior VP, Head Legal Advisory and Compliance from SBI Card; and Ms. Saumya, AVP Legal Counsel, Sustainable Energy Infra Investment Manager Private Limited. Now, we welcome you all for this insightful discussion. First of all, I would like to invite Mr. Chandramouli Dorai for a presentation. He is a Chief Evangelist for Cyber Solution and Digital Signature at Zoho Corporation, where he has been driving product marketing and strategy for more than 12 years. With expertise in cybersecurity and legal tech, he helps organizations strengthen digital trust, stay compliant, and embrace secure digital transformation. Mr. Dorai, please, if you can share your screen.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, everyone who has joined the session. I will start sharing my screen. I just want to set a little bit of context before we. I think my screen should be visible by now.
Yes, Mr. Mohammed.
Okay. A little bit of context setting before we jump into the real discussion that we have planned for today. So today, I'm very happy and very honored to be among this great list of panel. And our primary agenda for today's discussion will be around digital personal data protection and the IT governance and mandates from RBI and SEBI, and how organizations can build a workforce security culture without compromising productivity. So security, productivity can go hand in hand. And we will also have a quick Q&A session towards the end of the discussion. A little bit of housekeeping here. You can always use the questions tab, which is available in your webinar console panel. And we will record the session and we will also share the slides with you based on your request. And we also encourage you to ask good questions. We also award good participation based on the engagement level. So without getting further, first, let's get a quick layman terms of what is Digital Personal Data Protection Act. So most of us would be aware about the GDPR, which came into existence way back in 2018 times in the European Union. So Digital Personal Data Protection Act is the Personal Data Protection Act from India, especially for our digital data. So primarily, this gives the Indian residents more control, more ownership over their digital personal data. Say, for example, if I want to open a bank account online, I need to share my Aadhaar ID. I need to share my address. I need to share a little more of my personal information and also professional information. And many times, not just with banks, we share this information with a lot of businesses who process this data, and they also keep it for a longer tenure, more than expected. This particular act gives more ownership and complete control to the data principals, that is, the data owner. If I am going to use an online service, this gives me complete ownership of my digital personal data. At any time, I can request the businesses to delete my personal data once that purpose has been solved. Say, for example, I open an account. Once that is done, and once it is processed for that particular purpose, I can request for the deletion of my data based on the requirement from both the end. And the government of India is also bringing a lot of penalties for organization not having the right security controls at place. And there is also additional penalty up to over 200 crores for not notifying the data breaches to the concerned authorities. This is pretty much about the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. And When it comes to the regulated industry, especially the banking sector, NBFC, and also the exchanges where we have a lot of AMCs, brokerage houses, the primary enforcement from RBI and SEBI is around the identity and access management control. So when we handle a lot of financial data, the employees who is handling this data should have role-based access control. At all times, I should have access only for the required operation. If I am part of one department, I should have access only to the operation that I am pertained to. And on top of it, all the financial data should be within the Indian soil, and it should be relying in the Indian data center. There are many instances in the last couple of years where RBI and SEBI has imposed huge fine on financial institutions for violating these particular mandates from their side. So, if you take the DPDPA, RBI IT governance, and SEBI CSCRF of 2024, most of them revolves around the basic controls. You need to have the right identity and access management provisions. You need to have the right governance layer at place. On top of it, today we are also going to mandate the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. So all these acts are going to bring more control, more security, and more governance for both banking and non-banking industry that is under the Indian soil and governed by the government of India. So all these layers are stacked on top of the IT Act of 2000. And if you are a business who is operating in financial sector, and if you are operating somewhere in the healthcare sector, or if you are part of any regulated industry, you should be really aware of all this regulation that is coming into enforcement, and you need to have the right security controls, right governance tools in place for your business to get started. So why all of this is today important? India, we have over 100 million, 1 billion people, and most of us has access to the internet today. Today, we are one of the most top nations across the globe to have access to the internet, and technologies like Aadhaar e-sign, DigiLocker, e-stamping, and today with access to mobile devices and internet, most of us use more than 2 dozen application. And with this 2 dozen application, that also opens up the security cyber threat landscape for all of our personal data as well. So most of us use a password based login mechanism for our applications and website. And today, with all this governance coming into picture, more of the businesses are adopting the passwordless single sign-on mechanism. On top of it, biometric multi-factor authentication into picture. And the second major challenge for most business is the shadow access. When we are working in a large IT environment, we also have contractors and third-party workers who work on our client data. So we need to have right access control mechanism while we allow our contractors and third-party workers to work on our customer data. Today in 2026, AI is the taking the center stage in every single discussion. Most businesses today are trying to automate their repeated tasks with AI agents. So even today, we are not able to have a proper identity and access management for humans itself. But with agents and AI, today we need to have control over non-human identities on top of it. That is the challenge that most businesses today are facing with. So, when it comes to the compliance, digital personal data protection, the Aadhaar backed e signatures can play a crucial role to get signatures and your agreements and your consent form in having the right time stamped and identity linked contracts on top of your existing workflow. And this also includes both your employee data as well. The Digital Personal Data Protection Act doesn't exclude your employees. Even this also includes your employees personal data on top of it. So, for to build a security first culture, we need to first have the visibility of our existing IT environment. We should offer the right set of tools for our employees so that they don't trespass the security layers. We should make the security layer really working so that they take the right path and use the right tools to have the right governance and controls in place. So, this is a quick snapshot of the timeline that is available for the organizations to adapt themselves with the upcoming laws. We have 10 or more months left to adapt the right digital personal data protection measures. To begin with, we always suggest organizations to have a quick internal review of our existing infrastructure, and they need to know how the personal data flow is currently in their organization, and then they need to come up with an action plan, and they need to have a long term plan for the upcoming year so that they are compliant and they can also avoid the fines from the government of India. So, Zoho as a technology company, we have a good, tightly integrated workforce security solutions that can help businesses. For instance, for identity and access management and governance and control, we offer a workforce password manager. And for to have the right Aadhaar-backed digital signatures for your consent forms and agreements, we offer our digital signature solution, Zoho Sign. And especially you will have a lot of contracts with clauses that is related to personal data protection, and you also need to update your older agreements with the right personal data protection amendments into it. To automate all of this, we also offer an AI powered contract lifecycle management solution, which is Zoho Contracts. So if you are someone who is interested to update your existing system, I just give you a 10-second here. You can scan this QR. It will take you to a landing page. This is a self-assessment free tool. You can select the right radio button to understand where your organization stands today in respective of your contract management, and from there you will be able to take the right steps to know how you can comply with the DPDPA. And this document can also be exported from this free solution, and you can share it with your internal team, and you can take the right steps. So that's pretty much I want to cover today. I will hand over the session back to Kumar, and thank you very much.
Mr. Thank you so much for your insights. Now let's open the discussion with our speaker. A brief note on how we'll proceed. Our panelists will engage in a thoughtful discussion, and participants are welcome to post their questions in the chat box. We'll keep the question interactive. We'll be ensuring that the Q&A is followed by interactive session by the speaker, where speaker will take forward them and address it on a time-to-time basis. We are expecting a 15 to 20 minutes of an interval before we take and address it. Now, as we move forward, to set the context for the today's conversation, I would like to begin with an open forum and inviting all our speakers to share their opening input on how our organizations are planning to build a secure, compliant workforce framework aligned with India's regulatory landscape. Now, while managing the challenges data, access, and risk while enabling a resilient and a future-ready digital India. I would like to start with Mr. Zaki, if I can have your opening inputs on this. Yeah,
I'm
we can.
Zaki. I'm based in Bangalore. I'm part of a legal firm, Mizan, realm of law. I have been a technology professional for a very long time, about 25 years across the world, multiple countries, multiple cultures that we have been working. So, when we are talking about these conditions that have come in place, the digital public infrastructure that has to be put in place, and all that, I think India has been in the forefront and it's been exceedingly doing pretty well because we have one of the most diverse cultures that is possible to be seen across the world. With reference to the manpower, most of our people are working across the world doing all these technology developments and all that. Coming down to the challenge of where we actually have, I look at it in three perspectives very specifically. The first perspective is having a strategy in place because this is a strategy that decides. And once the strategy decides, there you have to have a system that executes, right? So the system can be human, the system can be machine, the system can be, any process that we would have put in place to make sure that these compliance measures are put in place and taken care of. The third part of it is the statute, which is the governance framework. So the triad of strategy and the system and statute will actually bring in the compliance that is required here. And in all of this, look at it, there has to be a baseline. What is the baseline for us to really take care on how the workforce obligations are taken care under DPA? Because here now the employee becomes personally accountable. That's most important, right? Whereas RBI and SEBI expect proper cyber security, they expect good governance, resilience to come in place. Now, building a compliance first, workforce, you need commitment to be in place. Now, going back to a 80-year-old, thought process that we have had, there is a principle of maker and checker that used to be there, Somebody makes and somebody checks. That's exactly how compliance can come in today. You cannot say compliance is there and people are doing it. It doesn't happen that way. And another thing that you need to remember here is business speaks about trust all the time. I don't see that there is something called trust in business. It's not available because trust is something between, a parent and child. It is born. It's born because of the connectivity which is there between them. But in a business system, you cannot find that. So what comes in business is belief. You believe on a rule that has been created. You recruit a person, you believe on the documentations they share, the degrees that they share. You make a customer based on the KYC that you do. So all of this is based on evaluation and proof. So for you to make sure that you have compliance in place, you need to have evaluations, you need to have proofs. So for everything that you're doing here, you're right, you have to bring in an evaluatory framework. You have to bring in somebody who is going to be compliantly looking at it happening. So that's precisely where I said trust is not something. And that is the reason there is a concept of zero trust, because the machines don't trust each other unless a code is exchanged between them. And that's precisely where the compliance comes in place, right? So the employee data, the access control, the identity governance, and all of this makes identity as the principal perimeter. And that's precisely what I think even the ET legal framework that we're talking about, the webinar that we have, very specifically mentions that identity is the most important perimeter and not just the network, not just a building, right? So, and the pandemic has changed quite a lot now because you were first sitting in a building covered with network security, people coming in, access control, having a card going in and out. But now when you sit outside, you're working from home, how do you extend your security there? So there were places where we do a VPN connection. You see when the person logs in and logs out. But all of this can be altered. All of this can be managed. Managed security is possible. So today that cannot be done with the DPDPA Act coming in place and across the world, multiple such regulations being in place. It becomes very difficult to manage it. And then there is part of the insider risk that comes in place. There's a part of third party exposure that comes in place. Your vendors are coming in, they are going in. So all of this has to be managed. And I think that baseline has to be created from where you start building on how compliance can be put in place. I think I should stop here. Maybe
Yeah,
I've given
Mr.
quite a
Zaki.
brief. Yeah,
Yeah, Mr. Zaki, you set a tone right for this webinar, and the point you have shared will unravel each point while we move ahead in this webinar.
very
A
good.
further question will be from Mr. Vyas. Mr. Vyas, can I have you on the issue that what kind of practice would you like to foster to ensure that the organizations build a secure and compliant workforce? Mr. Vyas?
Yeah, thanks, Aditya. I mean, I'll just build on what Molly and Zaki just talked about, right? I mean, I think very pertinent points. But being someone who's basically, I'm a privacy professional and an AI governance professional, a lawyer by training. What we've seen is overall, right? So we've implemented privacy and AI governance frameworks across, say, 36 jurisdictions, wherever the organization is there, and understanding the law is definitely one thing, right? Everyone needs to understand what the law is, but implementing it is a whole beast in itself, right? Especially when we're talking about something like, when we talk about workforce security for that matter, I think that organizations need to move away from just viewing it only as an IT control issue, right? Today, the world that we're in, especially with AI coming in, data privacy requirements coming in, it's more of a data protection, like Zaki was mentioning, identity governance, there's cyber security, there's regulatory compliance that comes into play, and there's employee trust, right? So with so many things coming in, and in addition, we have the DPDPA, which says that organizations that determine the means and purpose of processing are the data controllers, and they remain responsible for ensuring lawful processing, implementing appropriate technical organizational measures, security safeguards, and for personal data breaches. Now, in such a scenario where we have all this together, what I feel is on this pertinent topic that organizations should start building workforce framework around, around some pillars where they can understand where all this can integrate with each other. So maybe something like a data governance strategy, right? So where what employee, contractor, vendor, customer data you're collecting, why you're collecting it, where you're storing it, who has access to it, when it should be deleted. So this gives you, the first pillar. The second pillar that we look at, right, when we talk about workforce management is identity and access governance, right? I think Zaki also touched upon it, where access should be role based, right? Someone who needs access on a business need, least privilege with periodic review, where you keep checking that workforce identity is now becoming central to enterprise security, and therefore how much access are you giving to whom. The third being risk-based security controls, right? So based on what kind of data is being provided, right? What privileged users, we now have remote workers, right? I mean, there are hybrid scenarios within organizations. You have third-party contractors, you have developers who are working, you have finance teams. The kind of data they're using is extremely sensitive, right? And therefore, accessing this such sensitive data requires even stronger controls. So that is something that organizations should think about. There's also regulatory alignment, right? So, with we're talking about RBI's cyber resilience directions or SEBI's cybersecurity, cyber resilience framework. All of them emphasize on governance mechanisms for identifying, assessing, monitoring, and managing cyber and information security risks. Right. So the baseline of controls also has been provided, be it vendor risk management, incident response. So those need to be put in alignment for workforce. And finally, I think resilience and preparedness. So where organizations can detect, respond, and recover instead of it being reactive, everything should be proactive. So just to sum it up, right, based on the discussions that we've had and that we'll be taking forward, what I feel is that a compliance first framework should go hand in hand with digital transformation, and it's about making digital transformation to have digital transformation in the right way, right? It should be sustainable, it should be trusted, it should be resilient, it should be done in the right way. So those, I think, are my opening thoughts on the issue that we're talking about.
Yes, Mr. Vyas, we're glad to have that. In short, I can tell very clearly that what you have given is a summary of what we're about to discuss for next 1 hour. And for our audience, I've been very clear with this. We'll unravel each point with precision to ensure that what we offer are not just academia thoughts, but practical insights on what's happening, what's the impact, and what they can learn, and what's the impact on the organization, on the study of work, or the scope of practice. Now, I would like to include in this discussion, Ms. Saumya, if I can have you on this input, that what practices do you suggest to ensure that the organization build a secure and compliant workforce framework? Ms. Saumya?
I think first and foremost, I think what we need is a change in our thought process on importance of data privacy. I think while a lot has sort of grown from before, but I see that still organizations view it as a tick box thing to comply with SEBI requirements or RBI requirements or DPDP Act rather than addressing the importance of maintaining the privacy of personal data or understanding the spirit of it, right? So I think the first thing that I think is required to change in organizations slowly is the thought process of of understanding how important it is, right? Not only from a compliance perspective, but otherwise. And I think after that, then understanding what the requirements is, whether under the RBI, SEBI, or DPDP Act, and understanding where are we, each of the organization are in terms of complying with those currently, right? And what are the gaps and how can those gaps be fulfilled, right? Now there are two ways two ways in which any of these gaps can be fulfilled. One is, of course, you come up with policies or you come up with solutions that will prevent you from getting those penalties. Second is that you come up with solutions or sort of policies that in spirit will result in implementation of those laws, right? So I think given the importance of privacy and data protection rising in India, the organization should cater towards the later part of it and not the former part of it, where you're just complying for it, and that's where the start should happen, according to me.
Thanks, Ms. Saumya. Ms. Vandana, if I can have your input on the same.
Yeah, I think most of the things are covered by everyone. I just have one quick point to attach to here is we need to change our mindset. Like we want to be innovators. We want to have AI in place. We want to have everything digital in the company. So one thing which we need to understand is the employees are the backbone of the company, and we need to train them from the very day they join the company on the privacy perspective. What are the privacy laws attached to each and every area? What are the cybersecurity threats? What are some of the risk areas? And also reward them if they bring up with the point that, okay, this is what is basically going wrong in the organization while we are using this digital media, and just reward them from those kind of incentives. Okay, now you're making the organization compliant. And we don't have to see only from RBI, SEBI, or a DPDPA perspective. We have to also see from some of the I'm sure there will be so many people who are working in GCCs. They will be having a above law, which is basically, I would say, monetary authority of Singapore have a different kind of mindset towards this AI implementation in the organization, and what are the governing laws which are attached to it, which will be also flown down to the other jurisdiction level as well, because the reporting authority is at the global level. So you need to also understand that the global laws will also have an implications attached to not only to RBI, SEBI, or DPDPA, attached to those corporates. So we need to be very, very vigilant about all these things before implementing any kind of tool in the organization or having an agentic AI, which is a very, very burning topic nowadays. Everybody wants to have agents to just streamline their work. But we need to see where the data is going through and whether that data is actually required to be inserted in those agentic AIs. Is there a necessary requirement? Can't we do it manually, or can't we have some kind of process implemented without the use of AI, which we can, leverage to solve these whole problem? So these are some of the areas that I think we should be focusing upon.
Thanks, Ms. Vandana. Ms. Shephali, if I can have your opening statement on this.
Yeah, good afternoon. I hope I'm audible and visible to you. Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
I think most of the
Ms. Vandana. Ms. Shephali, if I can have your opening statement on this.
Yeah, good afternoon. I hope I'm audible and visible to you. Yeah, hi. I think most of the points are beautifully articulated by the panelists. But just a couple of things I want to highlight. In fact, I want to build on what Saumya mentioned. I think compliance first begins with mindset first, perspective. I think organizations first, you have to imbibe the very fact that privacy is fundamental. Customer data privacy is fundamental, and every organization has to do its best to secure it. There is no way. It's not just the law or the policy. I think this is gonna be the way we're gonna do our business operations in future. As we sit in various discussions, boardrooms, when we talk about DPDP implementation, I see that there's a lot of mental resistance to the fact that there is a consent mechanism required. There's going to be data deletion at some stage, which we're going to come to that very soon. Once we implement. So there's a lot of resistance, mental resistance that this is going to impact my revenue. It's going to impact my sales. It's going to impact my business operations. Yes, there will be, but at the same time, what we are looking at is a not just a digital India, but we're looking at a more secure, a more safe, digital India where customer data is respected and consented. What the whole concept of explicit specified consent, which the DPDP emphasizes, that I think we have to internalize it, that I have to tell the customer what am I going to do with them, with the data that I'm collecting for, and do I have a consent for it or not. I think some of these very basics have to be first internalized by the organizations. So the way it typically works is that the way I look at it, in terms of sequence, first the mindset or the culture comes in, then that culture reflects in your policy. That policy then goes down to your people who are implementing it, who are living it day in and day after, and then the processes, and eventually it becomes a practice. So that's how it works. So till the time your senior management shows importance, stresses on the importance of data privacy, I think a lot of there will be gap in terms of implementation. Secondly, I think this is also a letter in spirit kind of an issue. Am I having a policy just because I'm required under the regulations, or am I having a policy in place because this is important for me? I think that's another thing that the organizations, a related point that organizations have to deal with. And one last point I want to highlight is, in this whole journey, in this whole framework that we're talking about, letting go is the most important part, at some point of time the customer is going to come back and say that please delete my data. Right to forget, right to delete, data deletion is going to be, as customer, it's going to be my right. So when they come, I have to delete it. I have to let go of that whole customer data, because organizations, earlier traditionally, we work with the mindset that I own the customer data. It's not ownership. I think what DPDPA clearly lays down is that you're a fiduciary, you're a custodian of the data. And if a customer comes back and tells you that please delete first, please share what you have, please delete it, what you have in your systems, we will have to honor it. We have to have systems, in place for it. It may come at a cost. It may have an impact on your business. It may have an impact on your operations. But there's no looking back. It has to be there in place. So I think that's what I would want to highlight.
Yes, and Ms. Shephali, taking the same thing forward, on the boardroom, DPDP, and the building of a culture. I'd like to ask you that the DPDP has now made privacy and governance a boardroom issue regarding be it cost, be it compliance, be it regulation. Now, beyond regulatory compliance, how can organization build a culture where every employee sees themselves as responsible for data protection?
See, when we talk about culture, see, culture obviously and always comes from the top. You know, what the management displays and what it tolerates. You know, are we tolerating a little bit of, so some of the gaps where we know the data security is not being maintained the way it should be? If you're tolerating it, of course, then that's going to go down as a message. So if when we talk about employees, it's very important that those examples are clearly set. And when we talk in terms of the examples, we're talking about a whole enabling framework which is in place, where the I think other panelists talk about access management. We're talking about training awareness of the employees. Are they being trained from time to time as to what is it that they're supposed to do? I think someone highlighted that data security. We've been looking at it as only an IT issue. However, what we've come to realize now is that impacts the entire organization, impacts the way you operate as an entity. So I think every little part of the business, whether it is legal compliance, of course, we have a different role to play in the whole implementation. But other teams, whether it is operations, whether it is your sales, it is your marketing, all the teams have to be educated to make them understand as to what is the role that they play. What is it that the organizations expect them to manage, to ensure when they are, and also the policy framework which has been given clearly, in the documents. I think that education has to happen when we talk about employees, and also when there is a case of human error, how is it that we are addressing it? Are we just putting it under the table that we'll do something about it? Are we really addressing it? Because even if it amounts to making a report to the regulator, even if it amounts to something coming up maybe in media or something, but what is the example we are setting whenever something like this happens? I think that's beyond boardroom as to what goes down in terms of your day-to-day practice.
Yes, Ms. Shephali. I would like to have Ms. Vandana on this issue, that what would be her recommendation to ensure that organization build a culture where every employee sees themselves as responsible for data protection. Ms. Vandana?
Yeah, I feel Shephali has covered everything which I wanted to speak about it. But I would say one more thing, that the employees themselves should understand that it is not a regulatory requirement, but it is a matter of trust, ethics, and business resilience. So it might start in the boardroom, but the data protection only succeeds if it becomes a daily habit in the workforce. So I will just say that everybody shares a responsibility in the organization to protect the data of the business, not only the customers. It also have the implication on the business data as well, which is very sensitive. And if it gets leaked, then what is going to be the repercussions around it? I would also say that though I think the trainings and giving the trainings on the privacy, giving trainings on the how this could be a driving force for the organization, I think real time examples can be also given to the team members when they join the organization, and that has to be the first training program that everybody should attend to. That what is the implications around the data privacy, how the company is taking data seriously, and how it has to be processed. You are accountable for your own data processing, and whatever data you have, the access you have to it. So I think that is the base point that we have to start up with. And of course, have a continuous, reinforcement of those statements to the team members so that they can understand, okay, how critical this is to the organization.
That was insightful, Ms. Vandana. Now, I would like to rope in Mr. Chandramouli, because now that we are talking about culture, the culture and tech, they do come together. And with Mr. Mondi, I would like to ask that Digital signature and identity management have become foundational to secure the digital businesses. Now, how are these technologies evolving to address emerging cybersecurity risk while still delivering a seamless user experience? Mr. Molly?
So I always get chance to talk to a lot of clients. What we see from the field, primarily around identity security, is we have come a long way. Still, in many organizations, they still use traditional password-based authentication mechanism, where they put in all their password into a spreadsheet, and then from that spreadsheet is loosely shared via team chat or email, and some even print it out and paste it on the top of the device, the organization device. So this means there is no clear accountability of who is accessing which particular device, from where, when, and all that. When an IT incident or a data breach happens, the data protection officer, he or she, they will not be able to know who accessed this device, who accessed this particular customer data. That is the primary challenge that most businesses that deals with customer data face. And today, slowly, most of these businesses are adopting passwordless authentication mechanism, which can be a single sign-on, which can be a passkey-based authentication. Because if we are not going to offer a security mechanism that is convenient for the end users, they are always going to find an alternative way that will help them to stick back to their old non-hygienic method of handling their identities. And when it comes to especially the digital signature, initially we were using stamp papers. Today the government of India has made it easy with e-stamping, and we also have technologies like Aadhaar based e-sign, where our identity is linked to our Aadhaar linked mobile number, and we have an additional OTP on top of it. And signing documents with Aadhaar linked phone numbers and ID verification methods brings convenience, but it also not compromise security. India is always is at the forefront of adopting both security and also convenience, because we have access to internet for more than 900 to 1 billion population of internet users. We have the largest access to the internet. We have the most convenient fintech innovations like UPI. Today, none of us carry our wallet along with us. We pay with our UPI payment portal wherever we go. So we need to offer security without compromising convenience. That is where most businesses are trying it hard to have better identity security mechanisms, and also the digital signature and trust infrastructure at place.
Mr. Molly, now carrying us forward from identity issue, I'd like to focus on that identity increasingly becoming the new security parameter, as we all talked about. Now, how should organization rethink authentication, access management, and workforce security in an AI-enabled workplace? How can that
So,
be done?
like Mr. Zaki already talked about, identity is the center of our organization security. It is at the heart of the organization security. And another panelist also talked about identity is becoming the core of the organization security. Today, the perimeter of the organization is not starting from the outside, it is within the organization. You have malicious insiders, you also have contractors accessing your personal data of your customers, personal data of your employees. And on top of it, now we also have the AI agents automating a huge part of our repeated tasks. It can be building a report, it can be building your daily scheduled task, it can be any automated task, but this agent is going to play with your customer data or your employee data. So going back to the basics, the organization should first have a clear understanding of their identity governance in their organization. They need to know the total number of employees in their organization. They need to know the total number of non-human agents in their organization. That is the first step. From there, they need to know a clear picture of who has access to what accounts. Only the people belonging to the particular department, based on roles and responsibilities, they should be granted access to access the required data. If I am part of marketing or finance, I should have access only to the data or to the accounts which I am pertained to access to. That is the implementation of role-based access control mechanism. On top of it, many financial organizations are also bringing just-in-time mechanism. So I get access to the server only for a limited period of time between 12 p.m. to 12:30 p.m. That is the type of access control limitation that companies that is under the purview of RBI or SEBI are operating today. Especially, you need to have a tighter shadow control mechanism when you are working with third-party controllers who are working on your customer data. So the zero trust privileges, role-based access control, just in time. This might sound more of a jargon, but today these are all the basic expectation how enterprises are expected to handle the customer data and also manage their entire IT infrastructure. Kumar.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Molly. Mr. Vyas, if I can have your input on the same issue about how should organization rethink authentication, access management, and workforce security in an AI-enabled workplace. Yeah,
Yes,
Mr.
totally,
Vyas.
Maria. I mean, in fact, I agree with the points that Molly brought out, right? So, I agree that the premise that identity has become the new security perimeter is definitely, the times that we live in. So, earlier, like Molly was also mentioning, organizations have had a protected, defined office environment. Now, you have employees working remotely, you have cloud platforms, you have SaaS tools, right? You're collaborating with vendors outside. So also increasingly interacting with certain AI systems. So therefore, all these boundaries, the traditional boundaries that we had with respect to the networks that we worked in, has become blurred. And therefore, the right question to ask for these times is this the right user? Are we using the right device? Are we accessing the right data? Is it being used for the right purpose, and is it the right time? So therefore, organizations are having to and have already started rethinking what workforce security should look like. And majorly, in addition to what Molly brought out, you need to have definitely strong authentication, right? So only passwords won't suffice. You need multi-factor authorizations, authentications. You need phishing-resistant authentications, right? And strong controls for privileged or high-risk users once they are identified. There also needs to be least privilege access. I think I covered this in my last point as well, where access needs to be role based, it has to be time bound where needed, and has to be reviewed periodically so that you know who has access for what. There has to be context aware access, right? So it should consider factors such as location, what is the device health, user behaviors, sensitivity of the data that you have, risk level of the activity. For example, if someone's downloading large volumes of say customer data or employee data from an unusual location, that should trigger additional controls, right? So that becomes extremely important from a identity security point of view. And finally, I think AI specific access governance, right? So we're seeing where this is becoming extremely critical, especially because in an AI enabled workplace where everything is being pushed to be done with AI, employees may use tools to summarize whether it's contracts, confidential information of the organization, customer reviewing customer data, analyzing any HR data, generating reports from the data they have. And therefore, organizations need to define what data can enter such AI tools, right? And which tools are approved, whether prompts outputs are retained or not, whether the data is used for model training or not, right? From a DPDPA perspective, if we look at it, right, because we're talking about Digital India, this matters because a lot of this data contains personal data and needs to be protected with reasonable security safeguards that have been mentioned in the law, right? So organizations remain responsible for any processing that is carried out by processors or third-party AI systems also, for that matter, right, on their behalf. And if there's a breach there, then it basically falls onto you. And therefore, I think, in an AI-enabled workplace, identity governance doesn't again remain as a cybersecurity control, but it becomes a privacy, compliance, business resilience, overall governance, from that framework, if you look at it, because even RBI and SEBI with their cyber resilience directions specifically recognize that identity and access management form a baseline for such controls for regulated entities. So definitely, yeah, these are things that need to be kept in mind when we talk about identity and security.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Vyas, on that. Now, I'd like to go to Mr. Zaki on this about AI deployment in workplace and ask about, from a governance perspective, what safeguards should board and legal leader should establish to ensure that AI remains transparent, accountable, and legally defensible? Mr. Zaki?
See, very nicely put across by everybody that we need these technologies in place and all that and all that. That's a given thing. There's nothing that we can get away from that. If I step into my technology role, being a CIO at the government of Dubai level, with the government of India level at BSNL, MTNL, and all that, there have been projects where we are talking about managed services. All right. What is a managed services activity? The system that was there under your table moved from your table to a data center, right? The moment it goes to that data center, you need to have access controls. You need to have a creation of access methodologies into it. And today you're getting into a state of artificial intelligence, which simply means everything that you have been earlier doing is now automated and ready for the information to be processed, right? Going back to my first point when I made the maker checker rule, which was there about 80 years back when it came into banking, when it came into audit, it was essential at that point in time itself that somebody who does the job has been approved by a second person, right? There's a recent incident that I can talk to you about. Usually, when a normal person gives you an access to your laptop on an AnyDesk or a third-party software for you to install something and use something else, right? You have given him the access of your machine. And that access of the machine is to be decided on who and what is he going to do there. Now, how does the third party control that, right? You need products there, but you still need to have those rules, which the RBI is bringing in place, which the DPA is bringing in place, right? Now, the other perspective I can give you is about going back to the courts. Hundreds of cases have not been resolved for so very long time. But today I can employ an AI system into it, and I can analyze all of these cases based on precedents. That's how a case is determined, based on the law, based on the fact, all of this will identify and bring you a result of the case. But will that be the judgment? So that is precisely where we'll have to differentiate, because my last discussion that I've had at the Supreme Court, when we're trying to implement the AI governance policies in how we are going to be doing that, can we employ AI to do this? The consultation process that has happened there, which specifically means, yes, you can, but the decision making is still supposed to be human. It cannot be automated. It cannot be given to AI, right? So the analysis can come, but the thought process on how this will be governed in terms of the decision making, it has to be human. So governance is an organizational capability, and it is not that the policy fails, it's the execution that is failing. So it is necessary that every decision that is made, any significant decision that is made that will affect somebody, has to be having a human owner, without which getting it in the hands of AI will not be the way that we should be going around.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Zaki. Now, I would like to bring in Ms. Shephali on the question that with the DPDP raising the bar of privacy, what common compliance gap do you see as organization implement the DPDPA and strengthen the workforce security? Ms. Shephali?
Yeah. So, in terms of DPDPA, specifically, if I talk about, I think the first and the most important thing most of us are struggling with is having a consent framework in place, wherein the customer provides you an informed consent for the processing activities for which the data is being stored or processed. I think still, even now, most of the organizations, we take consent in a very bundled kind of a form, that, there is this one big undertaking which is mentioned, which no one reads, which no one, and even if you try to read, you won't understand. You won't really know as to what all's going to happen to your data just by giving a tick. So I think that whole, system of giving a very, very specific pointers on which the customer is supposed to consent to, what is it that's going to be mandatory for you to collect if you have to continue providing the product or the service to the customer, or what is it that's going to be optional. I think the first challenge is to have a consent framework in place and to implement it again in terms of spirit and not just in paper. That, tomorrow, if the customer has not really consented, say for a marketing campaign, you can't reach out, just to understand that it's going to be the norm. You will not be able to do it. So that both in terms of policy and the mindset, as I mentioned, I think that's an important gap that we have to work on. There is, of course, in terms of technology, which other panelists have spoken about. That's not really my expertise, so I would not really focus. I won't really talk about it. But yes, there is definitely a gap in terms of technology which needs to be bridged. Third thing is, I think I mentioned it in my previous response also, is data deletion. We were having a discussion the other day, and we were looking at how this whole framework will work, and people were still wondering that, that doesn't mean that we're going to archive the data. Like, no, the data is going to be deleted forever, which also means that, when a customer comes back to you, say after a few years, and asks for certain bit of data, or ask you for something, since we are a regulated entity, and REs often receive requests from customers, say 10 years later, or 20, 15 years later. At that point of time, you will have to see that I do not have your data, sir. I have deleted it. So that framework also has to be thought through. And also, see, deletion is the most, if you ask me, it's the most challenging aspect. It's more than the, consent framework, because the data is gone. So you also have to, when you're building your deletion framework, you also have to build in a concept of for what all are you going to do. You need to retain it. For example, there's an active litigation which requires you, or is a regulatory action, RBI, audit issue or something, for which data is required to be kept. So that has to be ensured, that has to be built in your systems. So I think, very briefly, most of the organizations, and especially, which is operating in the BFSI sector. So that's all from my side. Yeah.
What Shephali is saying versus, and even I think Ms. Vandana would also agree, the practical deficiency that she has said on record management, like litigation that she identified now, right? 20 years ago, somebody would have taken a loan, and that loan would go to litigation now because the property needs to be divided among the family. And there is a law that has to be defining who took the loan versus how this was distributed. So the investment that has to be done, where the money came in from. If this data is deleted, what happens? How does she come to court and sustain those, defend those issues, and bring those perspectives to the court so that proper adjudication can be taken care of? It's a very important perspective that has to be managed today. And that's precisely where, the analysis of such data, which traditionally in our country, in the banking system that has been there, has to be protected, and to ensure that that is in place, you need to have, data to be managed in certain manners with those access amount of data to be available. So I think she's very much true in terms of the kind of practicalities that they're going to be facing and how this is going to work around.
Yes, Mr. Zaki, and yes, Mr. Shephali, great insights. Now, coming back to what Mr. Zaki was discussing with us, two questions from here back about AI being deployed in government's perspective. that what safeguards should the boards and legal leaders should undertake. Now, bringing in Mr. Vyas on this, how that we all have witnessed that AI is changing how legal team reviews contract, manage compliance, and assesses risk. Now, what governance principles should organizations establish to ensure these tools remain transparent, responsible, and accountable? Now, this is a shift. This question is a shift from what I asked you, Mr. Zaki. That was about the legal leadership, and it's about the legal team and the compliance team. Mr. Vyas?
Yeah, sure, Aditya. I think this is a very pertinent question, right? So, I mean, again, I would emphasize over here that, see, responsible AI has a lot of principles, right? We talk about ethical AI and responsible AI. Ethical AI is basically like a lighthouse, which says, this is how things need to be done. Responsible AI shows you a way that, okay, this is how it has to be implemented. But principles are many, right? We talk about, say, around 19 different responsible AI principles, but how do I operationalize them? How do I get them into action? How do I, when I'm working with AI, what should I keep in consideration, right? So I'll just keep that in mind when I'm answering this question, because we already know that AI is transforming how everything is functioning, right, with respect to how things are happening, and especially how legal and compliance teams operate, right? I mean, if we're talking specifically about legal and compliance teams, you have activities such as contract reviews, you have clause comparisons, you have regulatory research, you have compliance monitoring, right? Due diligence, risk scoring, M&A is taking place, policy analysis that needs to be undertaken. With Gen AI coming in, a lot of that has been given to AI, right? So one thing that we need to understand here, I think Mr. Zaki was also mentioning this, where while AI can accelerate all this legal work, it cannot assume legal accountability. That accountability still remains, with an organization or a human behind it. So if an AI tool, for example, incorrectly flags a clause, if it misses a regulatory obligation, if it misinterprets a contract, if it produces, say, a hallucinated or inaccurate compliance recommendation, we've seen a lot of cases across the globe as well, where there have been submissions in a court of law with hallucinated case laws which didn't even exist. An organization or an individual at that time cannot say, well, an AI tool did it, right? So the responsibility remains with the organization or the professionals that are using the tools. This also becomes true again with the DPDPA. I keep tying it to the DPDPA because a lot of data that goes in again is sensitive and personal data and stuff like that. So the data fiduciary remains responsible for complying with the act. So while we may say that the DPDPA does not extensively talk about AI, but as soon as personal data, there is a component of that, it becomes extremely pertinent because the DPDPA puts the full responsibility on a data fiduciary and expects them to have reasonable security safeguards to prevent any data breaches and technical organizational measures in place. Now, that being said, from an AI perspective, with teams such as legal teams, compliance team using it, I would majorly look at it, in the form of what principles should we take into consideration. So maybe one would be, say, accountability, right? So what kind of questions need to be, what does accountability mean, right? It basically means you need to have ownership with respect to the outputs that are generated. So the answers that an organization or an individual using such tools for a legal or compliance purpose should be: who approved the AI tool, right? Usage of the AI tool in itself. Who owns the business outcome, right? With respect to the output that's coming. Who validates the output? Is the output being validated at all? Who handles any incidents that may come into play? Who reports the risks to leadership for that matter, right? So all this needs to be defined, and that basically defines the accountability principle. Then you need to have human oversight, and that human oversight needs to be risk based. You have a lot of laws across the globe, starting with the EUAI Act, which basically give a risk based classification, right? So for lower risk use cases such as summarizing a policy or extracting clauses from contracts, a lighter human review may be acceptable. But when we're talking about high impact use cases, right, something that is talking about regulatory breach assessments, that is talking about employee misconduct investigations, fraud reviews, customer risk determinations. Where if you're talking about banks, you're talking about whom to give a loan and whom not to give a loan. These are put in under high risk, and there are specific obligations that you need to abide by. So whether you have conformity assessments, you need to have bias assessments, you need to have proper testing, you need to have proper monitoring after they go out. So that becomes risk-based human oversight. The output needs to be completely validated based on the risk, right? So a recommendation can be sought from AI, but humans remain responsible for the decisions that can carry any legal, regulatory, financial, reputational, or employment consequences, right? So that comes into play. Privacy by design, right? That is another principle that is extremely important, right? We already have that in as a concept in data privacy, but legal and compliance teams often handle very highly sensitive data, right? That can be employee information. You can have customer records, commercial contracts, investigation material. Now, all of this, before using an AI tool, there is a requirement to assess what personal data we're processing. Is it necessary for the purpose, right? The processing, is it necessary for the purpose? How long is it being retained for? Is it being retained at all, right? What data is being used to train the model? Are we sharing it with any third parties? Is there any cross-border processing? So those questions become extremely important from a personal data lifecycle perspective when we are using an AI tools. Of course, you have transparency and explainability, right? So we started with the premise saying that AI said so is not a defense which can be used tomorrow. If say a regulator, an auditor, a court, or even RBI supervisor, a SEBI examiner, if these guys come and ask you how a conclusion was reached or how a decision was taken by this AI tool for whatever purposes, anyone who is using such AI tools will have to explain what data they were using, what prompts or inputs were they giving, what outputs were generated, how did human review take place for it, how were the final decisions made, and why were they made, right? So this is what transparency talks about. It's not only about disclosing proprietary algorithms. It's not about that. It's about ensuring that decisions that influenced by AI, they can be understood, reviewed, challenged, and defended, or changed if required, right? You have security and vendor risk management that needs to take place, right? So for any kind of exposure for personal data, for any kind of unauthorized access, for model manipulation, right? So these are security requirements that we look for, because AI governance as a whole that we look, especially when we're talking about sensitive data and legal data, they need to include vendor due diligence. They need to have contractual controls in place. Security testing needs to be there. Data processing terms need to be agreed between both parties. Audit rights need to be set out. So security and vendor risk management, again, a very important cog in the whole wheel. And finally, I think there has to be continuous monitoring, right? All this is not a one-time approval. As we know, there is a concept called AI degradation, where models can change, regulations can change, data changes, business context may change, right? So therefore, what is the output accuracy? What is the hallucination risk that we're talking about? How is bias being measured? Say from today it was fine, but 2 years down the line, after the tool is being used by the legal team, any kind of regulatory changes that have occurred over a period of time, have those been taken into consideration as part of outputs of the AI system? So this basically are the principles which need to be imbibed, again, like we were discussing, starting with a culture change, with policy changes, those policy coming into play, and then emphasis on this being documented in a way where everything falls into place. Again, 100% accuracy is still not guaranteed, isn't expected either, but the best that humans can do with respect to while using it for such sensitive data and sensitive requirements is that these decisions need to be human led, right? While AI is already there, the future of legal work is humans working with AI, but AI enabled decision making should be human led, right? So not looking at speed and scale, but along with looking at speed and scale, maintaining accountability, transparency, privacy requirements, and most essentially, human judgment, right? In any kind of usage of these tools is the way ahead, right? That is how I feel organizations or individuals should be looking at it, especially when working with sensitive data or sensitive requirements such as legal requirements.
And Mr. Vyas, on the issue of AI governance framework, I would like to add that what should the organization do? They should either develop a standalone AI governance framework or integrate AI governance into existing legal risk and compliance. What are the pros and cons attached to each of the either of two?
Yeah, no, absolutely. See, what we feel is AI governance should be a standalone requirement. But what we have seen is that AI governance is a culmination of different fields and different stakeholders, right? So if we look at the overall life cycle of an AI tool or AI system, you talk about starting, which is very similar to how we brought about privacy requirements, right? How privacy governance frameworks were established. So when you look about any AI tool, we first look at what kind of an inventory do we have? What are the use cases, right? You understand and identify the use cases. There's ideation. So for ideation, what needs to be put in place? Then you look at specific at the designing level, how an AI system is being designed. So within AI design, if you have the responsible AI principles integrated, it becomes much easier to be compliant with whatever regulations and guidelines that there are in place, right? Once you have design, you go to development, where you develop the AI system based on, and then you look at what kind of data there is. Then you finally go to a place where you have developed an AI system and you start monitoring it, you test it, and you finally go to an AI degradation. Now, when we talk about a standalone AI system, there are three major parts that I think organizations should look at, right? From a legal and compliance framework, especially as well. First is about an AI system, right? So what are the use cases? What is it used for, right? That helps you in risk classification. Then you look about what data that is being used, right? So whether the data is financial data, is more sensitive data, that also gives you an idea of what kind of regulations are in place. And finally, you look at what kind of AI governance is in place, right? Are you using the EU AI Act as a measure? Are you using the NIST AI risk framework as a measure? And a combination of all these gives you a global AI governance control, where you have things in place and also know what needs to comply with what, which may not completely solve the issue, but at least puts you in a position where you have a governance framework to show which was followed for an AI system to be put onto the market.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Vyas. Ms. Saumya, if I can have your input on the same, that should organization develop standalone AI governance framework or integrate AI governance into the existing legal risk and compliance structure? Ms. Saumya?
I think it will be both practically, right? The sort of governance policy, of course, is going to be separate, but it has to be integrated in the current system. It For an organization, it will not make sense to have sort of separate standalone a system for each technical advancement that happens, right? For an AI also, it will go through the same sort of flow that every control that goes in the system. So, for example, board will be overseeing the implementation or the risk matrix of it. The HR team will be seeing will be involved in usage of it, usage of it. The risk committee will be involved in seeing the impact of it. The legal will be involved in seeing these regulatory compliance of it, right? But I think the current system have to be evolved to cater to the cater to the governance requirement of the AIs, right? Like as everybody mentioned, that while you implement AI, you need to figure out what you will do about the hallucination rates that the AI sort of gives. You need to figure out who's going to be accountable and what is the policies around that. That and all needs to be evolved in the system and in the policies, but definitely be integrated uh, 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 in the system, in the existing sort of core system of the institution.
And Mr. Zaki, if I can have your input on the same.
We are talking about having an independent AI, standalone AI framework. My perspective on this would be a little different because unless there is a governance framework that is in place, there is no point in having an independent AI setup coming in place. For the simple reason that that would become a governance failure at that point in time. It will become a silo. There'll be people appointed to look at only that portion of doing it. And I don't see such a thing that every organization can still have the capability of building its own AI frameworks at every department level or every company level. So that would not be something, an easy achievement thing to come by. For which reason, I think compliance has to be a foundation that is defined by the law, which is very clear. And technology is something that has to be there just to enable that, which has been one of the jobs that technology does, right? While the governance has to be the one which will bring that belief system that I talked to you about, where you have somebody doing the job and somebody checking that out, so that it is assigned to a human that, yes, the system did the job, but it was still checked and put in place. So that is how I would see things will have to move in place, for the simple reason that you cannot give decision-making power to each organization trying to make its own AI-based methodologies and to create that. So it has to be either modulated through a product or it has to be modulated through a solution which the government or the rules will have to bring in place.
Thanks, Mr. Zaki. Now, I would like to bring in Ms. Vandana. As now that we have explored about AI, let's bring AI into her industry and ask about that financial institutions are rapidly embracing AI, that's for sure. Now, digital onboarding and cloud collaboration, how should legal and compliance function balance innovation and privacy, regulatory compliance, and governance? Ms. Vandana?
Yeah, I will just add to what Ms. Vyas and
Please do.
Mr. Said, because that is relevant to this particular topic. I would say that a company should have a consolidated AI-based risk framework. When I say that, it should be coordinated with all the departments in the organization and then be implemented in the organization. Um, because it will have various inputs, as I would say, from HR, from IT, from the risk point of view, and it doesn't only include the aspects of legal and regulatory. It includes the aspects of any kind of international standards that can be used to protect what is going into AI and how the AI is going to get evolved through it. And of course, there has to be an audit attached to this framework, that is this framework working appropriately in the organization or not. And that has to be done by a person who is independent to the organization. It's not going to be a person who is related to the organization. I would say hire an internal auditor, have this processes audited so that you can understand where you are going through. And of course, when you're developing, so I will say in kind of banking sector, you have lot of opportunities in building agentic AIs to build your own agents to solve your problems. So in that situation, you need to also understand what input of data is going in that particular system, how that is impacting and rolling it out, and whether that is giving you a factual data or not. What is desirable as an outcome is being given by that agent or not, and what kind of information is being fed in the system. Every department in a organization, especially in financial sector, they have lots and lots of confidential information. Along with that, they have lots and lots of password protected information, which is only accessible to certain level of people. And if it is being breached, it is basically having a trigger of risk attached to it, which will also have the disciplinary action, that how you can share this data to the other person, because that is the whole control mechanism that is there in place. So absolutely, those information which are there with those kind of users cannot go into the AI. So this kind of framework should be built in the organization. I would say this whole consolidated AI usage case, and there has to be a case study to it. Okay, these are many things which you can use the help of AI. This is absolutely prohibited. So you need to have a proper demarcation of what can be done through AI and what cannot be done through AI. So I would say this is a starting point, and of course that whole program need to be built up on those areas, and that has to be continuously monitored and audited as well. And audit frequency can be designed by the organization, whether you want to do it in 6 months or whether you want to do in a year. But I would suggest you should do it once in a quarter, so that you need to align, okay, where you are standing in terms of your framework and what is the addition that you can build it on those grounds, because it is very very sensitive. Whatever information the financial institutions have, those are very very sensitive information. You can use AI for your regular task, but for sensitive information, for sensitive data, it has always been said not to use an AI, and those kind of parameters need to be absolutely built in.
Thanks, Ms. Vandana, for that insightful what we have about the banking and AI or innovation, what can be done, what is the right approach, and what can be done in a sense, not just academia, but of course, to understand that the AI cannot be used without demarcation And demarcation has to be one way ahead. Like way long back, we used to see that cybersecurity was just an IT issue. Like AI, when came, it was being deployed for left, right, and center, are being deployed for good 2 years. Now we have understood that what GPT generating is actually a peril to my personal data. And now we see there is some kind of resistance towards deploying my personal data through GPT or consumer GPTs available over the internet. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Molly on this that way long back and still do that many organizations still treat cybersecurity as an IT issue. How do legal, HR, compliance, and even technology leaders are working together in the industry to ensure that they are building a true organizational resilience? Mr. Molly?
Kumar, basically, when it comes to security, most of the security decisions are happening within the IT teams, and it is always expected the IT team is accountable for all the security decisions in any organization. But today, with this DPDP Act, whoever is going to handle the personal data of both employees and also customers are becoming part of the whole chain. So when we are going to onboard a new employee, the HR team should grant access only for the right set of access control mechanism for the right set of tools. Say, for example, I'm going to onboard Mauli into the marketing department or the strategic department. Mauli should get access only to the required data. I can only access the marketing tools. I should not have access to the customer information. If I am going to get that information, it is going to expose my company's risk to a larger area. And when it comes to the legal department, there should be a clear policies and contractual obligations and clauses in place, like Mr. Vyas said. So we need to have that the legal team involved part of the compliance structure. They should know who is getting access to the personal data of both employees and also the customers. And when it comes to the governance, they should know whenever a breach happens, who should be notified, and do we have the right set of audits for every single action that is performed. So most companies, they assume this won't happen to me when it comes to security or privacy you take for any enforcement for that matter. But the moment something happens really bad, they should immediately report to the data protection officer or to the concerned department with the new regulations in place. Right now, when a data breach is going to happen, the time is going to start tickling, and we should have a clear picture, and we should prove the audit mechanism to the data protection officer and also to the body. And these are all the people who had access to the customer data, the employee data, and they shouldn't start having the right controls and governance once something has happened. So this is why everyone who is part of this entire chain, who is handling the personal data, should be part of the whole process, not just the IT team, Kumar.
Mr. Zaki, I would like to have you too in this conversation regarding you have seen a shift, a tectonic shift actually in the last 2 decades about how cybersecurity has been a critical subject of IT issue, but now moved to legal with compliance with regulation, with SEBI, RBI, with DPDPA, all ensuring that cybersecurity, data protection is not just limited to tech field, but can also have repercussion on legal front. Now, Mr. Zaki, how do you see this shift and what do
See,
you understand about this trend?
there are certain dimensions that have been there all the time, for cybersecurity and all these methodologies. Earlier, it used to work on the dimension of a philosophy. It has got a reactive philosophy, so we're going to be doing after, whatever has happened and investigation is taken care. But today, that doesn't work like that. It has to be proactive now because the perimeter, like we said, has changed. It is not within the office, it has gone out of the boundaries, right? So it has to be proactive. And earlier, the focus was policy driven. Now it is supposed to be architectural driven. For the simple reason, they were pointing it out that can I have access to this data? Can I have access to that data? Data has been sitting in the databases in a certain format. That format has not been architecturally planned and divided on how people can gain access to it. And if somebody is giving them an access, how can they give partial access to certain amount of data and not the rest of the data? So those data structures have not been created, right? But that goes into actually building the perimeter network now, to building the physical network that was there earlier, into how an identity perimeter is created, who is the definition of this person, and then how do you actually execute all of this, right? Do you do through a manual audit, or do you do through a automated framework, right? So the replication, I mean, I can give you certain examples in terms of a document management system which is there in any company. A certain set of documents are created and it needs to be shared between a set of people, right? So under that, the contractual clause have to be added, which should not be seen by some rest of the people or a financial set of people and all that. So how do you on that document separate these activities, right? So that is a structural and that is an architectural way of putting things across. So unless you go by design now, you cannot create something that was being done earlier. That is going to be the differentiator. So that design has to come in place. So the thought process is to be changed. The silos have to be broken out, and it is not that the IT team, because I mean, sorry to state that we've been talking about IT team trying to do this, IT team trying to do that is not going to be there now anymore. It is everybody who's going to be doing it. And initially I brought about the discussion of a data center where you're having managed services being provided. So there is a third-party IT team which is being interfaced there for you. So how are you going to put out that amount of data to be available to this person and not to the other person? Which simply means you have to create that design framework. That enterprise framework has to come in place. I'm sure, I hope Chandramouli will agree to that, because that is exactly where the product development is going to go. That's how the product development has to come in place. And when we're talking about Ajay as well, sorry if I've got the name wrong, that is for him in terms of implementation. If that implementation framework is not available, no matter the product is available, he cannot do that implementation. So it is going to be challenging in both these ways, right? I'll give you another cited example on the learning systems itself in an education system. Okay. Today, your Zenji is coming up with answers even without having the knowledge. Right? That's exactly what is happening. So if a teacher wants to evaluate a student on what answer they have prepared for a given questionnaire, everybody has the answer. But the core issue is, did he have the knowledge to actually prepare that answer? So how do you evaluate him? How do you identify where did he get this answer from? So it has to change the methodology of evaluation now. So she has to, or the teacher has to actually make the student stand in front of you and answer these in an analytical manner. That is the design that has to come in place. So if that design comes in place, only then you are able to really evaluate that person, put a perspective to him and say, yeah, this is what you did. This is the reason we have given you so much of marks, right? So that is a methodology change. That's a design change. And that is not only for the Gen Z, it is also for the person who's the custodian. It's also for the teacher. You got it? So that's a different complete framework. I'll give you an example in the banking system. Right? The banking system has to do messaging to every customer on every activity that they're doing. So many SMSs sent, so many emails sent, so many things sent, so many things sent. All right, fine. There is a breach that happens. Now, when that breach has happened, do you think that the customer has seen those emails coming, those SMSs coming at all? Because there are so many of those coming. So how do you identify which email that was sent? So when he has a breach, he comes back to the bank and he says, I lost so much of money. The bank says, we sent you the messages, you didn't see that. So how do you actually clip in that space where the breach was happening? And that is when you are supposed to hold it happening. So that cybersecurity now is a very different methodology, right? So unless that design comes in place, you cannot. Because the compliance, they can say, we sent you 200 messages. We have the database that shows we sent you these emails. You did not read them. what happens? Right? So we have to have answers for all of this as part of the cybersecurity put in place, the policy frameworks to be put in place, so that that becomes accountable, that becomes compliance.
Yeah, now, Mr. Zaki, on that one, I would like to bring in Ms. Saumya and ask about on the question of design, building a design that as organization embrace digital transformation, how can a design can be implemented and executed within the legal team to ensure that the compliance first culture is fostered while enabling innovation and business growth?
I think, I mean, and it doesn't only apply to AI, it applies to everything, is when in-house team starts sort of collaborating more rather than advising. That's when I think is something, that's when I think you can sort of promote innovation while sort of preventing risk. So instead of uh, saying that no, it is not possible, telling the other teams how it can be made possible, right? Like, right, finding the right balance between identifying risk, mitigating them, but yet letting the business happen is one of the ways to do it. And I think the second way is to ensure while doing it, include as many departments and people as possible, right? And educate as many department as people and people as possible, because while we may have the understanding and bandwidth and resource to read and understand all of these, the other departments may not. So that's another way to sort of go about it and ensure that we are innovatively solving all of these issues and taking everyone along.
And Ms. Vandana, if I can have your input on this.
I think Soumya has covered everything. I would not have much inputs to say on this, but I think training and governance on this ground is very, very important. I think reinforcing this message to all the employees of the organization would really help on those grounds.
Mr. Vyas, if I can have your input on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered quite, but it's rightly said, no? I mean, because everything was happening in silos before, where managing technology, privacy, cybersecurity, everything was in separate silos. So today things are different, like right, like we've been discussing. So simultaneously, there can be a scenario where an AI system, for that matter, there is personal data processing, there may be cybersecurity risks, intellectual property concerns, there are employee monitoring concerns. There can be things like, say, third-party supplier risks, regulatory obligations. So, effectively, what has happened is all these fields have all these disciplines in a single governance framework, right? So, we're basically looking at a single governance framework which ultimately leads to trustworthy innovation. So how can this be done? I mean, in addition to whatever my fellow panelists also were talking about, it's about bringing these conversations in the beginning of any project starting or any AI systems being there, right? So instead of engaging with all teams separately, I think together in the design phase, in the procurement phase, in any testing phase, in deployment, questions like what data is involved, what laws apply, what risks exist, what safeguards are needed, all those questions and assessments, if they can happen simultaneously together with an understanding of the cross-functional nature of requirements that there are today, that will lead to much better outcomes for organizations, for sure.
Now, as I move ahead, I would like to bring in Mr. Morley on this, that as organization adopt AI-driven workflows and cloud collaboration tool, what are the biggest identity and access management challenges, and what do he suggest to businesses address them without adding complexity?
The primary challenge that we see in our customer environment is more around siloed IT and identity management solution. We are looking forward, we are suggesting more tightly integrated identity and access management solution for our end customers. On top of it, today we also have AI that is accessing the customer data. It get direct access to the CRM. It is preparing your meeting summary. It is sending out periodic reminders to the customers for activation basis and other purposes. So it is primarily more about having consolidation around the identity and access management services, and having the right set of entitlement for the access privileges. That is the major challenge and the major recommendation that we give to our customers, Kumar.
Now, as we conclude, I would like to have a conclusion. A question to end up with will be: it's open forum. Now, I'll have 1 minute each to all the speakers here, and the question will be: what is one governance, privacy, or cybersecurity challenge organizations are underestimating today that will become a board level priority over the next 3 years? I'll start with Mr. Molly. You.
Okay. I was just saying, I have been repeating the same one because the whole fundamentals circles back to the having the right access control and governance mechanism in place, and with the perimeter is transferring across AI, human identities, and non-human identities, and everywhere. We need to have stricter controls, and when a breach happens, we need to have a clear playbook of what should be done, and what are all the audit trails that is left, and within how many hours, say for example in finance, and we need to inform the authorities within 6 hours. So for each particular vertical we have some tighter time frames and all this to be done. But many organizations figure this out once they are breached. It is better they get prepared before, they have the right set of controls and audit trails in place, and have the right set of root cause analysis framework for their organization, and how they are going to inform the data principals, the who are the sole owners of the digital personal data. So that's pretty much from my side, Kumar. Yeah, thank you.
And Ms. Vandana, if I can have your one governance, privacy, or cybersecurity challenge that organizations are underestimating today?
I would say it has been there in past, but it's going to increase in future are the deep fakes and impersonation. And I'm seeing it because there are going to be a lot of cases coming up with the use of AI. And that's why there is a whole, governance framework which is required. And of course, as Zeke said, government has to take it very, very seriously and design a law with for governing the AI as well.
Thanks, Ms. Vandana. And Mr. Vyas, if I can have your input on this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I firmly believe that one challenge that organizations are underestimating today's AI-driven data exposure, right, through everyday workforce behavior. So we're saying that, throughout organizations, we're giving access to, say, a Gen AI tool where a lot of confidential organizational data is going, but there are still questions around how those Gen AI tools are storing that data, where is it being, how is it being handled, what is the retention timeline, etc., etc. So we're seeing where employees are using AI tools left, right, center to summarize documents, draft emails, analyze spreadsheets, all of that. And the risk in that is that the confidential information or personal information, customer data, IP data, source codes, all of that also is going into all these tools without proper approval and safeguards, right? Because we're still in a place where we're trying to put those frameworks in place, but the technology still is way ahead of, and the law is playing catch up, right? I mean, that is what we're seeing is the whole theme. Even, under the DPDPA, RBI, SEBI, all of them have specific requirements in place where the expectation is to have data security, access governance, vendor risk assessments, all of that to be in place. But for all this, I think over the next 3 years, if I say, the boards will increasingly start asking across organizations whether we know where AI is being used within the organization, right? And what data is being exposed to AI. Who has approved a particular AI tool? How are risks being governed within the organization? So shadow AI and uncontrolled data sharing to AI tools, I think, will definitely become a major board level risk, which I think it has already started, but within the next 2 or 3 years, organizations will have to address it through, policy, access controls, approved tools, training, monitoring, and an overall governance framework to be in place.
Thanks, Mr. Vyas. And Mr. Zaki, if I can have your input on this.
See, resilient organizations, are not built based on technology only. Yes, the regulations are supporting it for sure. But on top of it, I mean, the framework that we spoke about earlier, you need to have strategy, you need to have the system and the statute to work in that triad framework to bring that out, right? I mean, look at an example that the legal team is told that there's been a breach. By the time they come and check what has happened, what is remaining there is just a disaster. So, what is it that you can get out of that? So, you will have to prepare for that much earlier. And that much earlier is exactly where the design place comes in, and you should not have ever left that thing happen. So as of today, the methodology on how governance is going to work is it becomes an organizational capability rather than just being on paper. So making it happen and making that technology enables it at scale is very important, and governance becomes accountability. And if that comes in place, I think you have the systems doing its job.
And we have also received question under that. As we have concluded our session, I'll address one question that we have received from our audience, and it's an open question. Anyone from a panel can pick it up, and that is, how can organization address the risk of third-party vendor and frontline employees accessing the customer data without explicit consent and strengthening controls over data sharing and accountability?
There is no third-party vendor now. Okay. Everybody is going to be the same person, one identity management, one perimeter on how they are managed. So that concept of third-party vendor is finished, right? When you're going to give data to anybody, whatever sharing that you do, you have to define that perimeter under which that person comes in. So there is no scope for a third party now.
And that's perfect.
Yeah. Well, I agree with Mr. Zaki, right? I mean, so when we talk about third parties, right? I mean, the only essential way in which the risk per se can be contained is contracting, right? I mean, of course, there is a lot of, black areas, gray areas between what information is shared. And so that is where I think vendor assessments come into play. So firstly, you basically understand what kind of controls do vendors have in place, whether they have security controls, data privacy controls, what kind of controls have they put together. And basis that, right, I mean, you basically identify which vendors can come on board if they fall in line with what your organization's baseline level is. And then contracting, of course, because like I said, the law always takes hold of the data fiduciary, right? The law makes the data fiduciary responsible for any data that is collected, used, processed by them, even if it is outsourced. So the only way a third party can be held accountable is by further contracting. So back-to-back contracts play a huge role, but that risk in a way can be basically passed on to a party for any kind of breaches, any kind of security requirements that they have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vyas, for that insight. Now, as we come to the close of today's webinar, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all our distinguished speakers for sharing their valuable insight and practical experiences. Today's discussion made one thing abundantly clear: that building a compliance-first workforce is no longer just about meeting obligation in terms of law and practice, but it is about creating a resilient organization where security, privacy, governance, and innovation move forward together. Whether it was the impact of the DPDPA Act, evolving expectations from RBI and SEBI, the rise of AI-driven workplaces, or the growing importance of identity, access management, and digital trust, our panelists highlighted that compliance must become an organizational culture rather than a periodic exercise. I would like to thank Mr. Chandramouli Dorai, Mr. Mohammad Naseemul Haq Zaki, Mr. Arinjay Vyas, Ms. C.S. Vandana Bhatia, Ms. Shephali Mehra, and Ms. Saumya Singh for bringing together perspective from technology, law, banking, data privacy, and corporate governance. Your expertise has provided our audience with practical strategies to navigate India's evolving cybersecurity landscape. This webinar was presented under the banner of ET Legal World and ET CISO in association with Zoho Sign and Zoho Volt as part of Legal Security webinar series, We are grateful to our partner for supporting conversation that help organizations build a secure, compliant, and future-ready digital ecosystem. A heartfelt thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us and your for active participation throughout the session. We hope that the discussion and insights shared today will help you strengthen your own workforce security, compliance, and digital governance initiative. We look forward to welcoming you again in our upcoming editions of Legal Security Council. Until then, stay secure, stay compliant, and continue driving India's digital transformation with confidence. Thank you once again and have a wonderful day ahead.